Hello everyone. So I am making this video to introduce you a little bit to evidence. I will use an analogy and hopefully you are able to understand it. So I do not want to take a lot longer, so let's get going. So first, as we think of evidence, let's start with something familiar. So to begin to think of evidence, let's use an example most, if not all of us, are familiar with, which is a crime scene investigation. This is something that I think uh, most of you, if not all of you, will have some sort of background knowledge about with regard to how it relates to evidence. Just like you see in shows where they collect DNA or they collect blood samples or just whatever's at the crime scene that uh, may inform the detective what happened or what's going on. Okay, so we're gonna think of this in the context of a crime scene investigation. So let's go into our crime investigation. So our crime and our suspect. The crime we will investigate is a murder, and in this murder, our suspect will go by the name of Joe, and the victim will go by Bill. Okay, so Joe and Bill. So we think that Joe did it, but we need to prove it in court or it doesn't matter. Okay, so that's the key part. If we do not prove that Joe is the one that committed that murder, it does not matter at all. Okay, we need to prove it. So how do we prove it? We need to have evidence, and it needs to be concrete evidence. So some examples of evidence we may need are: is there a motive for the murder? So does the suspect have a motive? Is there an alibi? Does the suspect have an alibi? And if you do not know what is an alibi is something or someone that confirms the suspect was not present at the crime scene when it happened. So an alibi informs you that there's no way that this suspect could have done the crime because he couldn't have been there. Uh, so that's another piece of evidence. And third, is there matching DNA and fingerprints at the crime scene? So all of this will be able to tell us if Joe committed the murder of Bill or if he did not. And again, we're trying to prove that Joe did it. So we're trying to look for evidence, this type of evidence that will prove that Joe did it. So first, is there a motive? Yes. So there is a motive. Joe was upset at Bill because Bill owed Joe a lot of money. So right off the bat, that's our first piece of evidence. That is the first item or knowledge that we can use in court that will be able to tell us Joe did it. However, this is just one piece of evidence, and this is not enough. Uh, because we still need to prove that it was Joe. We need to prove it concretely. So just because we have this theory, it does not mean that it's true. We need more evidence. So is there a motive and is there an alibi? Again, an alibi lets you know if this person could have been at the crime scene or not. So again, yes, there is a motive, and no, there is not an alibi. So nothing or no one can say with certainty that Joe was not at the crime scene. Okay, so that's another piece of evidence that we have in our favor. Uh, and if you put those two together, our argument that Joe committed the murder is stronger. Okay, so those two pieces together make our argument stronger because we already know that there is a motive, and we already know that there is a chance he could have been present at the crime scene. But this is still not enough to prove that Joe did it. So now we need to have to ask: is there a motive? Is there an alibi? And are there matching DNA and fingerprints? So yes, there is a motive. Again, Bill owed Joe a lot of money. There is not an alibi. Nothing or no one can say with certainty that Joe was not at the crime scene. And lastly, yes, the DNA and fingerprints at the crime scene matches Joe. So our DNA and our fingerprint evidence at the crime scene where Bill was murdered match Joe. So that's another piece of evidence that we have in our favor. Okay. Now, if we put all these together, um, we can prove that Joe is guilty. Obviously, a trial is a lot more complicated, but with this, I think there is enough evidence to prove our argument. Okay, uh, and how is it relevant to English? So just like the lawyer, us as writers or as creators of whatever piece we will create in the future, we do the same as a lawyer. Okay, especially in this unit. First, you are trying to make a point, and you need to support it. Okay, so in the crime scene, for example, if we think that Joe did it, but we do not have the evidence to support it, there is no way that Joe could be found guilty for the crime. Okay. Second, you need to have multiple sources of evidence. So when we had that breakdown of why Joe could have done it, we had more than one source of evidence, more than one reason why Joe could have done it. Okay. Just like when you write, eventually when you write an essay or whatever you create, you need to have multiple sources of evidence. And notice how in the crime scene, it was the DNA and the fingerprints that was pretty much what sealed the case. So when you are looking for evidence, everything may support your argument, but you need to make sure that you have very strong evidence that cannot be uh, denied, which is the third point. Okay, that is where having that evidence, like the fingerprints or the DNA, is crucial. So when you write, you need to make sure that you have a very strong piece of evidence that the other side will have a very difficult time to deny. Okay, so that's it. That was my attempt at explaining what is evidence in the context of a crime scene, how it relates to English, and now you will have a chance to practice this a little more with other ideas.